الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So I believe the request was to speak about ayah number 62, Surah Baqarah, correct? Yes, in Surah Baqarah. So the ayah in question is إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالصَّابِئِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. So this ayah is often misquoted as a proof of a kind of perennial view of religion. I've actually heard with my own 2 ears in a khutbah a long time ago back in Westchester, the other side of Pennsylvania, close to Philadelphia, my hometown, someone using this ayah with that intent, to kind of prove that it doesn't really matter if you're Jewish or Christian, everyone's going to Jannah, everyone's going to paradise, there's no real reason to make a big deal out of our differences. Like I said, kind of a perennial view of religion. So, I'm assuming that's why this ayah was singled out, because this is normally what most people, or no, I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people kind of make that conclusion. They use this ayah and say, well, why does Allah say that? As I would attempt to translate, that indeed those who believe, and also those who are Jews and Christians and Sabi'in, which I would say are like the Good Samaritans, but I don't know how to translate it here. Sabians, okay. Right, the Sabians. Those among them, I mean, this is part of the reason why the ayah should not be misconstrued to mean that everyone's okay, I'm okay. It's a perennialist view of religion. Man amana, those amongst them, meaning those whom believe in Allah and believe in the last day and perform righteous actions. Indeed, they will have a reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Neither will they fear and neither will they grieve. Roughly. So because the first part of the ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالصَّابِئِينَ, those who are Jews, Christians, or Sabians. Okay. And it's separated from إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. So it may seem to some at a cursory glance that this is a clear indication that these people will also be recipients of Allah's acceptance. But then, of course, the part that I mentioned, which precedes right after their names being singled out, in other words, one by one, Hadu, one Nasara, Wasabi'in, Jews, Christians, and Sabians, Man amana. Man meaning whomever. You can translate in different ways. Okay. Man. Whomever, in other words, whomever amongst them, amana billahi wal yawm al-akhir, who believe in Allah and believe in the last day. Okay, so before we delve into that, like certain things have to be understood. That number one, Quran should never be taken out of context without understanding a few golden rules. First of them, well, two of them, I only mentioned two of them right now. The first golden rule is that the Quran explains the Quran. No ayah can be taken out of context with the rest of the Quran. Al-Quranu yufassilu ba'dahu ba'da. The Quran explains itself. If there's anything that's ambiguous or not too clear, again, what do? Something we talked about in the beginning of Surah Ali Imran. Something's not clear and ambiguous, how do we deal with it? We compare it to or verify it with something that is clear, that is muhkamat. Is that true? And furthermore, the same thing with the real meaning of tafsir, if you remember the very beginning of class, is to take a word and do what? Explain it, clarify it. So if it's not clear to you what was meant, if it's not clear to you what was said, tafsir literally means to do what? It means to clarify and the content or the meaning of that word or whatever was said. So if, again, there's something in your mind that is not too clear, the first golden rule is that the Quran as a whole explains itself. If that subject matter or word to you is, for some reason, it's just not making any sense, what's the first recourse? Look through the rest of the Quran and see what it says. So if this, for instance, let me take that rule, let's just hone in on that for a second. If this verse meant that exclusively Jews and Christians and Sabians in every situation, in every context will be saved, that Allah has accepted them, then what about other parts of the Quran that say, لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٍ, as an example, that indeed they have disbelieved. لَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Again, in Arabic, qad is it's something that emphasizes the subject matter. It's a very strong emphasis. So it's like saying indeed. Or in Urdu you'd say Beshak, right? Sawfi sad. Huh? Hey, 100%, no doubt. Kafara, they have disbelieved. Who? Alladhina qalu, those who say, Inna Allah thalithu thalatha. Thalithu thalatha, excuse me. Indeed, Allah is the third of three. Meaning a clear-cut ayah that says that people who proclaim the Trinity have what? Have disbelieved. So, and that's another golden rule. The Quran does not contradict itself. If it had contradicted itself, as Allah Himself challenges us, that if you were to think and do tadabbur and ponder over the meanings of the Quran, if it was from other than Allah, لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا, then they would find in this book much contradiction, meaning glaring contradictions, contradictions that cannot be explained, contradictions that don't make sense. Okay? So the challenge of the Quran itself is that it does not contradict itself. Am I right or am I wrong? That the subject matter is fluid. That there's nothing in the Quran that it's a glaring contradiction. So what does that say to you as a rule here, even just logically? If the meaning of this ayah is that Jews and Christians, hands down, with no exception, they're all going to paradise, they're all good people, Allah has accepted all of them, but in another breath Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that indeed those who say that God, Allah, is the third or the third of three, has disbelieved, what is that telling you? This is obviously not general, right? This is obviously not a general statement that all of these people will go to paradise, all of these people are accepted by Allah, because then Allah is also saying that لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثُ ثَلَاثٍ. Indeed, those who say that God is the third of three have disbelieved. So they're not even, forget about anything else, they have what? Disbelieved. Kafara. They are not believers. Here in this ayah also we see that there is not just a mention of them being Jews or Christians, but they do what? Man amana. They believe in Allah. In this other ayah, Allah is saying very clearly, people who say the Trinity or claim the Trinity are what? Kafara. They do not believe in Allah. So already we see that this is not to be taken out of context. So it cannot mean it is a general statement that Jews and Christians and anyone who claims anything, Allah has accepted them. Number one. So now we've used one principle, is that the Quran explains itself. Right? Furthermore, so many ayat of the Quran that you and I also, all of us pretty much should know at least. The ayah that we just talked about, we mentioned that I think last time we met, the end of Surah Baqarah. What does it say? آمن الرسول ما أنزل إليه والمؤمنون كل آمن. So Allah's Rasul and those who believe, they all believe in what has been revealed to the Prophet, and all of them believe what? Kullun, meaning every believer. You see the word kullun here being with every believer, no matter who they are, what context they're in, every believer believes in what things? Billahi. When what? And furthermore, you go through the whole ayah. What do they say? لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We do not make any distinctions between any one of the prophets. So what does that ayah tell you? If you think about it for a second. Believers, those who believe in Allah and they accept prophets, what do they say? لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We do not make any distinctions between any prophet of God. So rejection of a prophet is equivalent to what? Kufr. Rejection of God Himself. And furthermore, we keep on going maktuban. The Quran also claims as an example that who is mentioned in their books. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, maktuban, literally, it's written in their books. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What did Isa alayhi salam say to Bani Israel? Ya Bani Israel, inni Rasulullah ilaykum musaddiqan lima bayna yadayya wa mubashiran bi rasulin. I am giving you glad tidings of a messenger to come after me. Ismuhu Ahmed. His name will be Ahmed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So not only is he mentioned, but he's mentioned by name. The Quran is very clear about that as well, is what I'm trying to. So the Quran is also clear about the fact that all the previous nations before us were also told about the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they were privy to this fact before he came. So it's not even like someone just jumped onto the scene without anyone knowing that this was going to happen. His coming was something that was information that every prophet and every nation that was attached to that prophet and every book, maktuban, every book that was given to that nation, they were all privy to and knew about the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So just to re-emphasize the fact that it wasn't just them rejecting someone that they had no idea, you understand? They were not at all prepared or even aware that this person or this personage, rather, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was going to come on the scene. That wasn't the case. They were privy to this. They were aware of it. So it makes it even more emphatical that their rejection of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not to be perceived as anything but kufr.
So Imam, if you're not a believer, are you a kafir? Or is it possible to be considered a believer and just have a deficiency in your faith? Because what you're implying is then Islam, that's it. Everyone else is kafir. Because name a Jew who believes in our prophet, name a Christian who doesn't consider Hazrat Isa. So you're narrowing it down to
Well, yes. Let's put it. I wouldn't want to say we are, because then that means that it's something I or you or anyone else it's something from our own personal choice. If it was up to me, everyone would go to Jannah. If it was up to me, if it was up to my desires, no one would go to hell. But I'm not the one who sent people to Jannah or Jahannam. Right? This is the key. There's a lot of issues here. I'll try to tackle them one by one. But the issue is that decision is with Allah. Right? And when Allah decides that this is the litmus test, this is how and why, not how, I should say, even or why. But this is the test I'm going to give to all people, and this is in fact even the reason why He sends messengers. Otherwise, people in their fitrah will do whatever they do. Correct? Why even send a messenger? These are all linked. All these questions are linked. Why send a prophet? Even if you think about this from a logical point of view, it's one of the things I even thought of when this person gave a khutbah and tried to misquote this ayah that everyone's okay, everyone's going to Jannah. Well then, what was the point of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing any of this? You see what I mean? If you're okay, everything you're doing is fine, and you're already going to paradise, then why bother them? Why send a messenger? Why send a book? Why would Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam put himself in danger to the point of always being killed or rejected for years on end and all the hardships if everyone's going to paradise? That doesn't make logical sense. Do you know what I'm saying? Why would a man do that? Even from a philosophical and again logical point of view. And this is coming from a Christian. He was trying to defend against atheists, like the idea of rejection of Isa alayhi salam and his message. It's like you have to look at the message and also the messenger and the reasoning behind it. In other words, why would a man claim such outlandish things, but at the end of the day get nothing out of it except being crucified in their eyes? That's not logical. There's enough people to say that this happened, meaning that this person came in history and claimed these things. Now, if they were, this is why these questions were asked of him, if he was a king trying to restore his kingdom, if he was a man looking after name, fame, and wealth, or anything else, then yeah, we can put two and two together and say, well, maybe there's a reason to doubt all the things they did. But if you look at their history, all of the Anbiya, and our Prophet is no exception, that for the most part, actually not for the most part, he didn't receive anything at all. No remuneration for any of his efforts. So what was it all about? You see, again, it's just logical conclusion. Why did he do all that then? You see what I'm saying? What did he go through the trouble, in other words, of upsetting his own people, his own family, his own tradition, and everybody else's for that matter, if what was the whole purpose behind it? You understand?
Do you think people will go to Jannah based on La ilaha illallah?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
those who don't say it, they have no chance?
They,
Even if they are good in their actions?
see,
And
yeah.
harmonious, harmonious.
Yes, but here's the thing. Before we even, the reason why it's difficult to say that categorically is because, and this is where I'm going to have to talk about other issues outside of tafsir, is we have been in the modern age affected greatly by our education system, let's put it that way, and the philosophy behind it. And that's basically, in general, if we can put a label on it, it's the whole liberal ideology of Western Europe that had pretty much so colonized the entire world. It's just a fact, we have to admit it. Okay? And that mentality is first of all, we have to speak about it, and we have to actually understand why that affects us and why we can't hear things that conclusive. For instance, like, are you just saying that someone, as the question is posed, right, that someone who says La ilaha illallah, no matter how bad they are, they'll go to Jannah one day, and my neighbor Bob, who appears to be such a great person, who believes that Christ is God, right, that he will never go to Jannah. And if I just say categorically yes, it sounds to the modern ear very, whoa, that's ridiculous. But then we have to go back and say why. We have to ask really, really pertinent questions. Like, first of all, what is good and bad? Philosophically. When you say they do good, what truly is good and bad? We can ask even deeper questions, which they do in philosophy class at times. But okay, for instance, like I brought this up before, killing. Just as a concept, is it always bad? Lying, is it always bad? Even Western philosophers like, for instance, what was it, Kant, I believe, or one of them, he said that lying, the reason why it's bad is because in, again, a liberal or even a capitalist society, which capitalism is a result of liberalism, if we're all going to benefit from each other, we can't benefit from each other unless we're what? Truthful. Right? So the reason for that lying is bad in his view is because there's no mutual benefit in it. Okay? But why would I say take all those ideologies out, take religion out? Why is lying bad in every case and every time? The Prophet ﷺ said actually there are 3 times in which lying is actually a good thing. One of them is between spouses. As they call them, little white lies or whatever, right? Why is lying to a spouse? In other words, for instance, if you tell your husband that he is the greatest thing that ever happened to you, although maybe not. If you tell your wife that she's the prettiest woman, you're the prettiest woman I've ever laid eyes on, probably not. But why is that permissible? Why is that okay? Because it keeps the spark going, it keeps the love going, it keeps the romance going, all that good stuff. And that's good for a couple. Correct? So in that case, the Rasulullah said lies are okay. You're probably not the prettiest thing he's ever gazed upon in his entire life, but oh well, you'll accept it, you'll use it, and it works. So the Rasulullah said that that's fine. Right? Another thing that he said that lying is okay is because if there's a discord between people, right, between even political parties, for that matter. Let's just say in any group of people, any society, there's a strong discord and disunity. In order to bring unity between them, it's okay to lie. 2 parties that are at each other's throats. In other words, you know what? Actually, so-and-so really likes you. Halanke is probably not the true case. They probably really don't like them. Why are you doing that? Because you want to open the door of dialogue. You don't want to see these 2 people at continuous discord and disunity, so it's okay to lie, for instance, in that case. So all I'm trying to say is if you go back, again, just to even, without even religion, just from a philosophical point of view, from subjective, objective, moral philosophy and all of that, how does a human being really understand what is good and what is bad before we can even say that such and such a person is so good? What do you mean by that? That's the first question. What do you mean by they're good? They pay their taxes, they don't kill anyone, right? They're not a murderer, they're not a rapist. I mean, what exactly does it mean? You understand what I'm trying to say? Like, this is such a general statement that, and again, we can take it even further. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِكُمْ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us not to exonerate ourselves. It's hard to translate, right? It comes from tazkiyah. It means don't make yourselves out to be so pure and so good because He knows you, right? So if you take that even further, I would even just put this into perspective as an idea, and I have to take things to an extreme to make everything understood. Why was it so hard for many of the Western philosophers and thinkers after World War II to understand what happened to German society in World War II? Because in Germany, there was a great contribution to Western civilization in terms of philosophy, art, music, technology, everything. Okay? And actually, the whole modern concept of human rights comes from German philosophers. How did the same people end up putting Hitler into power, following him into the most destructive war that humanity has ever seen, and committed the atrocities that they committed, in other words, the Holocaust and so forth? How did that happen, right? Because again, the liberal ideology is that religion, this is very important, religion was the problem that we had all along. It was what divided us. It's what made people fight each other. It was what made people intolerant. Now this may, again, you see this assumption is that may have been true of Europe. But what's the problem with that? Is the whole world Europe? Is the whole world and all their cultures and religions, their experience with religion and culture is the same as Europe? What's the answer? Well, most certainly not. So just because in Europe that was the case, that religion was the main problem that they had with each other, which is true, all of their conflicts up until the modern time was primarily based on what? Religion. That's the case with them. Most of their greater conflicts up until that time were based on religion. So yeah, their experience was that, okay, so in their ideology, they had to get rid of that. Until we get rid of religion, we will not be able to live amiably together. That was their mind process. That's part of what the liberal ideology, what it spawned. Okay, now I went off course, but that's important to remember that point. So now, when they have come to this point where they replace religion with what then? The idea that human beings are just inherent, will just be good inherently. We can trust each other because a capitalist liberal system cannot work without that what? See, what Kant is with mutual trust, mutual benefit, and human rights. You see, I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay, no reason to fight. Let's just make money off each other and live, live amiably. So when that all fell, and it just went downhill with them, and it was replaced with ideologies like fascism and all the things that it brought these big questions. We thought that we were just inherently good people, and that we could trust each other, and that we could, for instance, just get along and just have mutual benefit. And all of a sudden, these guys came along and took a society that produced thinkers that had these ideas and made them into people who were completely intolerant, very violent, in fact, decidedly violent. That was their ideology, that they had to be strong, they had to be warriors, only the strong survive. The weak have to be exterminated. Literally, the Nazis believed what?
But they were always that way. With other cultures.
You're right.
Now they're doing
You are right.
Other Europeans.
You are right. But the whole idea is that they always, before that, they always put on the picture that they weren't. Correct? For themselves and the rest of the world, they put on you're right. If you go down, they were always kind of like that. But they tried to claim in the period of the Reformation and the Enlightenment period and all this, that the opposite is true, that we are very good people, right? We are inherently good, and all we have to do is get rid of religion and tradition, and we'll be okay. You see, this is what they proposed. This is what I'm trying to say is the idea came from them. But then the truth came out, and you found something else. Why am I relating that to the ayah, فَلَا تَزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ? Don't claim to be what? Pure. Don't exonerate yourself as being, we're just good people and we'll always do good. Because given the right context, what I'm trying to say is, and it's kind of this is what scared the West too, that maybe we were wrong with that claim. What we thought were good people, what we thought were people who were, who would do the right thing, ended up becoming something else completely. It shook them, you understand? So then they studied it. So my point is that looking at that, even that what happened historically and even philosophically, even with this ayah is telling us as human beings, don't claim to be good because Bob, your neighbor right now, might be nice. Let him lose his job and blame it on foreigners or a minority or a different religion or whatever it may be, that these people, they're the problem, and see how nice they'll be. You see, this is what happened in Germany. Economy went down. They had an enemy to blame, the French, the British, and everyone else, and the Jews, of course. You understand? And because now their economy is suffering, their society is suffering, they took out all of that on other people. Is correct or not? So what you see now as a good person, given the right context, give them poverty, give them problems, give them any other context, and maybe they won't be so nice anymore. Maybe the only reason they're being nice now or being amiable is because they have, it's all just a facade. You can't claim that anyone is good just because now they're doing this or doing that, even for ourselves. Meaning this is why even on another level we shouldn't judge other people. We can look at other people and the things they do and say how horrible, but how would you know, given the context, that if you were put in that situation, you wouldn't do the same thing? You don't know that. You don't know that if you were raised differently or if you were put in a certain situation, right? You understand? So it's very easy to look at certain people and say, wow, how bad is that person for doing this? But you don't know if you were put in that context, you would do the same thing, maybe even worse, right? So the idea is, if there's any good, it's only from Allah. If there's any judge of character, it's only whom? That's why we say La ilaha illallah is the way of Najah. Why? Because Allah knows best whom to guide and whom not to guide. It goes back to another ayah which we mentioned before. لَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعُهُم. If Allah knows that there's any good in these people, He will allow them to hear. So you're leaving the knowledge of these things up to whom? Allah. Who knows, you or Him? Right now, again, you're looking at these people like they did. German society was so great. They produced such great philosophers, thinkers, human rights, music, arts, technology, and all of a sudden they're putting people in ovens. I mean, I hate to be very graphic about it, but that's the reality. So how did that happen? Right? It's because you became the judge of character rather than God. You assume because of these outward things that they must be good people. But you don't know that, I don't know that. The same goes for us. Never assume that I'm such a good person, I'm so impeccably moral, I'll always do good. You don't know that. Just ask Allah to do what? Two things: guide you and to keep you in afiyah. What does afiyah mean? Whatever it is that I need to perform as a sane person, right? All of the things that I need, well-being in general, put me in that condition, because I don't want to be tested to the extent that it becomes what? It becomes something that is too much for me. Okay? This is what we were actually talking about, right? لا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملت على الذين من قبلنا. Don't give us such a burden that we cannot handle. Don't put us through such trials that will break us. Unfortunately, this is what happening to most of the Muslim world today, right? The trials of poverty have become so bad for the Muslims that it's broken them to become immoral people, unethical people. Am I just picking on people? Is this true? What do we say? It's true, right? It's broken us, unfortunately. So we ask Allah to keep us in that condition where, we ourselves, forget even other people. But what I'm trying to say is that in general, to say good and bad is a very difficult thing for a human being. Is that true or not? You understand what I'm saying? Like, this person's good, this person's bad. We don't really know. Okay? But does Allah know? Yes. And if Allah knows good in someone, and believe me, this is a trial for me too, and I think most of us, to see the condition of many Muslims and to be humble enough to say, well, if they're Muslim by the choice of Allah. Whether I see it or not, there must be something in them that Allah knows that I don't. In the same way that right now, Bob and all these other guys look really good, and so it's hard for us to imagine that God has not accepted them, but you have to leave that up to God. You don't know. Given the right circumstance, this Muslim may become much more moral and ethical than Bob could ever. And given the right circumstance, Bob, just like the German society surprised everyone, right? Bob, given the right circumstance, may become, and Allah protect us, may become, right, a racist, maniacal, ethnic cleansing type of, you don't know, given the right circumstance. And unfortunately, again, I don't mean to be extreme, but American history has done that before to the Native Americans as an example. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if that kind of character comes out, that the same wonderful settlers of the European settlers who came to establish this great, wonderful, liberal, capitalist society and all these wonderful claims would ethnically cleanse literally an entire people just for land and power and wealth. They've done it before. It's not like it hasn't happened. And what justification did they have? They were such good people, they were such good Christians, even if they're pagans, and even if they had these liberal ideals. They're not like you, they have a different color of skin, they have a different religion, different tradition. But see, that's why even liberalism itself can be criticized. And this is what John Adams, even one of the founding fathers of this country, was worried about, that this system in itself inherently tends to give a majority the power to kind of do whatever they want and abuse the system against minorities, as an example. All it really gives them at the end of the day is, again, is that they got rid of religious power in any of their politics. So basically you've got two freedoms really, the capitalist freedom of trade and, right, religious freedom, and now you're actually, and they're adding a third in this day and age, which is what? Sexual orientation. But when it boils down to it, if you're a minority, good luck. Because there's nothing to protect. For instance, is there anything in liberal ideology to protect the African American from not being considered human, which was the fact when they first doctored, okay? Was there anything there to protect them, again, the Native Americans, from not being considered savage and, again, inhuman and just, was there anything there? No. You see, they also can be criticized. They're not God, are they? Right? They can be criticized too for these things. They're only human. And they're not perfect, as they would like to believe they're perfect, and they've got the ultimate. I mean, I'm not making this up as conspiracy. This is in their writings. What was white man's burden? Does anyone remember that? That when the English and the French and all these enlightened people came up with these liberal ideologies and capitalism and all these wonderful things, they believed, and you can read this as a doctrine, but the white man's burden means now we have to make the whole world accept this, even if they don't want to. So even if the Muslims and the people in India and the people in Africa or wherever else we go don't want our liberalism, capitalism, it is our burden, the white man's burden, to do what? To make sure they accept it. Because this is just the better way. Religion is not the way. Religion only causes problems. This is already their decision, right? Tradition is not the way. Tradition retards growth and progress, and so this is their idea, right? There is no other way except this way. So even if these people don't appreciate our, so what is that? Is that tolerant? Is that, what is true? How do you tolerate somebody? They're different, right? And they don't agree with you, but you tolerate them. Now let me ask you, what did Islam actually teach us? This is what they don't get either. Yeah, I will categorically say that the ticket to Jannah is La ilaha illallah. I will categorically say that Trinity is kufr. I will categorically say that Judaism is kufr as well. But that doesn't mean what? It doesn't mean I'm trying to put you in a concentration camp. It doesn't mean I'm trying to ruin your life. It doesn't mean I'm trying to keep you back in any way whatsoever. Matter of fact, Muslims traditionally, what do? Even the concept of dhimmi, from dhimma, means to protect. When the Jews were being persecuted in Europe, where did they go to find prosperity? Where did they go? The Muslim world. Whether it was Spain, when it was still intact, or whether it was the Ottoman Empire, that's where they went, and they found high positions, economically, even in politics. So what am I trying to say? In our view, what do we say? I don't agree with you at all. Sorry. But I will still live with you amiably, as a neighbor, as a human, and I will even protect you. If someone tried to hurt you in any way, I would protect your honor, I would protect your wealth, I would protect your life. So do we have that problem? Is my question. Where is true tolerance? One is saying, we're the best, we have the best ideology, and now we have to bring that ideology to everybody, even if they don't want it. So as Muslims, even worst case scenario in their mind, that we become a khilafah and we start invading, and we ask people for jizya. Even then, do we force people to convert? Do we say, even if you don't want it, you have to have it? La ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in deen. If you want it, take it. If you don't want it, you don't have to take it, and we're still going to treat you what? Treat it amiably as a neighbor, giving you your rights, protecting your honor, your wealth, and your life. Am I right or am I wrong? Okay, so what do you have to compare? You see what I'm saying? It's the idea that they brought that if I don't agree with you from a theological point of view, it means I want to cut your head off. And some Muslims, unfortunately, incorporate that ideology now into their understanding of Islam. But the Prophet ﷺ never taught that. But he was very clear that, yeah, I don't agree with you because he's the messenger of Allah. Ala fatra, meaning in a time when the message, the true message of God was altered. So the whole purpose of Muhammad ﷺ is to do what? Is to clarify. Muhaymin alayh, meaning to clarify those alterations and to give people da'wah to the true message that was given time and more, from the beginning of time until now by every prophet. Is it clear? Right? Now, if they don't accept, even if they're going to hell, that's up to God. What did Allah say to the Prophet after that? وَمَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. You are only to deliver the message. That's it. After that, whom Allah decides who's going to Jannah and Jahannam again. And that even goes, we're talking about a lot of philosophical, even goes back to a very philosophical, theological, aqidah point, is that even at the end of the day, the definition of God is the one who does what they will. And it doesn't have to be based on a cause. For instance, I show mercy to someone because of a soft corner in my heart. So a human emotion drives me to do what? To be merciful. That's a human emotions are temporary, are they not? Do they change? Are they affected by outward causes? Of course. Can you say the same for Allah? Right. So if Allah is Allah, which He is, and He can do whatever He wants, here's the theological point. If Allah so willed, can He send everyone to Jannah? Yes. And also vice versa. The scary part, if Allah so willed, can He send everyone to hell? But do you see the point?
But isn't that, so there's a verse right in the Bible that says the only sin that is not forgivable.
It should.
It should.
But that's, again, what I'm trying to say is that first we have to get down to the core issues to understand this is like a side issue. You have to understand the core issue first. That's why I mentioned things like morality, philosophy, because you have to understand the core issues first, then we can talk about the side issue. The core issue is, can Allah do what He wants? Of course. And does He need a reason? Meaning, is He affected by a cause, like mercy in our hearts? Like, oh, Bachara, this person I feel so bad for. Let me do something for them. Like, is that the case with our Creator? No, He is merciful, no doubt, but it's not like a human emotion. Okay, mercy, that's why we say mercy is understood in regards to Allah as His will to do good to someone. Do you understand? It is not a human emotion like He was angry with you yesterday and now all of a sudden today He's upset because you did this. Or excuse me, He's happy with you because you did this. You get what I'm saying? It's a eternal, pre-existence will of Allah that, for instance, so-and-so, such and such. That's why there are people who may be in a state now. That's why we don't judge, right? Because they could be in a particular state now, but in their end, we don't know that it was Allah's will to have mercy on that person. So in their end, ultimately their state would be, that's why we leave it up to Allah. If they have accepted Allah, we leave it up to Allah's decision. Now when Allah says these things, meaning He will not forgive shirk, what is that? That is a revelation of His will. That in His wisdom, He has created things and He has made them different. That's another thing we observe. That shouldn't be something I have to prove. Is that observable? Things in creation are different. Are they all the same? So Allah has told us that, and we see it in observation that things are created in pairs. So if things are created in pairs, is everything that we see beautiful? Or is there ugliness as well? So what is that proof of? Allah could have made everything beautiful. See the point I made before, everyone can go to Jannah, just vice versa too. Everything could have been ugly. But rather, what did Allah do? He created everything in pairs, zawjain. Okay? To help you understand what it is Allah's will, that there will be certain people who will be felicitous. And it's his decision who they are, based on his wisdom and his knowledge. And there will be certain people who will not find that felicity and that success. And that is also based on Allah's knowledge and his wisdom. We as human beings have to acquiesce that there's something greater than us that decides these things. Just as we didn't decide when we came into this world the circumstances or the things that affected us as people. Your parents, your genes, your DNA, the time and place, how were you going to look, what were you going to look like because of this and that and the other thing. Was any of that in your control? So why now are we trying to be God and say that we should control Jannah and Jahannam? You couldn't even control your own existence. You understand? You couldn't even control your own, if you had that choice, like before you were brought in the world, like, hey, what do you want to be? You see, this is another problem. Postmodern world now, we're getting into that Dajjal type of system where like people think you can create another human being, right? Stem cell cloning, cell cloning, and all this other stuff. So now you can choose, right? I want to be this, and I want to be that. I want to have this type of DNA, as if you're playing the role of what? But before that, human beings, we didn't have that delusion, so we knew that, okay, this is none of our choice. Right? So why should we now try to play God in regards to something even greater than this life, which is the hereafter? We shouldn't. We should relegate it to God's decision. If certain people, and don't, that's why I brought up these other issues, because don't always assume because now you look at people as being good, that they are good. Because that's such a general term, first of all. We have to go back to the core issues, what's good and what's bad. Right? And then after that even, do we have that knowledge? When Allah says, don't exonerate yourselves, that we don't know what that person will be tomorrow. Okay? And this is why we said earlier in the ayah, qa'iman bil qist, what is true justice is to know that Allah, God, is unique. It's a very simple conclusion. If you cannot make that conclusion, tawheed, meaning if you don't know that your Creator is unique, how will you come to any proper conclusion after that? If you believe truly that a man is God, can you expect, no matter how much wealth and power that person has, can you expect that person to make any proper conclusions after that? Do you understand? That's why it's amazing, because Muslims come to me all the time and say, I don't know, I have this friend who's like an engineer and a doctor, but he's still a Hindu. I don't know what to tell you. First of all, it's your mistake to think, and please forgive me for saying this is a controversial statement, but I'll stand by it. Education is not synonymous with intelligence. Okay? It's not always the case. Education means you're in the right place at the right time, and if anything, I will give you worked hard. Okay? You understand? But it's not always synonymous with intelligence. From what I know, I don't know how true that is, but they say even Albert Einstein was not that good as a student. Okay, so you can't always equate an education, first of all, with intelligence, that just because they're educated now, they're always going to make intelligent choices. Even according to statistics, we forget more than half of what we learn in school anyhow. Actually, more like 80% of the things that you learn in school is gone. Okay, so whatever it is, that's why even here in America, people are like, man, it's not even worth it sometimes to go to school. I mean, look at, what's his name, Bill Gates. He dropped out of college, correct? Doing better than all of us combined and everyone else, right? He's a top 1%. He wasn't educated. So it's not, synonymous all the time. But even if we think like that, we'll think, well, at least he's at least halfway intelligent. He may not be a genius, but he has to have some level of intelligence to go and become an engineer or a doctor, yet he still believes in this. You see what I'm trying to say? So if you can't make the choice right about that God's existence, it's just a very simple conclusion. If there is a creator, can the creator be that creator? This is why we go back to even these talks of wajib al-wujud and cosmology. If Allah had a cause, would he be the creator? You understand my point logically? If Allah had a cause, would that be the creator? If you said there's a being, there's something out there in the universe has a cause, can that be the creator? No, because what caused it? It couldn't have caused itself. So it's an infinite regress until you come back to a point that there must be one being who, unlike every other being, had no cause, no beginning, no end. You see what I'm trying to get with all this? So even just from a logical point of view, if you believe there's a creator, there's no way that creator can be like his creation. There's a human being who clearly has a beginning, was born of a woman, And in between that time goes through constant change. As the Quran says, كَانَ يَأْكُلَانِ الطَّعَامَ. They ate food. Right? How in the world could you come up with a conclusion that that thing, that being, is God? Is that logical? And honestly, if you talk to your Christian friends, at the end of the day, they say, no, it's not logical. That's why I love Christianity, because it doesn't make any sense. You just have to believe. So, okay, well, good for you. You see? But the whole point is that, again, if they can't make that conclusion correctly, would you expect them to make any other conclusions properly? You see? Now, there's a bigger issue also with Muslims, is that, honestly, right now, we are in a very precarious time, because the Muslims should be, at least theoretically, should be the example of that upright person whose conclusion is correct, and therefore, as the ayah says even here, if your conclusions are correct, وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, you should be doing right as well. Now, when that's not happening, this adds to the confusion of everybody. Because the true example of what is right and what is wrong should be technically the believer. That doesn't mean we're going to be perfect. We are humans like everyone else. We make mistakes, but we are humble enough to ask for repentance. We have tawbah. We have even the idea of, trying to let your bad not outweigh your good, right? So if we have our problems, we acquiesce, but we're trying to do more good than bad. And that at least, this is why also there's so many problems, right? The new idea that's brought up in the community, like, well, if I'm doing bad, let me just be real and show everybody my bad. See, again, this is antithetical to all of this. The idea in the Muslim society is that if you're doing bad, try to hide it. Why? Because you're now responsible for a higher ethical standard. And you don't want to do what? You don't want to confuse people, because naturally they will come to this conclusion. How can I say that Ahmed is going to Jannah when they do this, and Bob is going to hell because he's just simply because he's Christian, and he's doing much better than Ahmed? You see, it's going to happen. That's how people are going to think. So what does Ahmed have to do then? Ahmed has to realize the name itself is the name of the Prophet ﷺ. And whether you like it or not, you're representing the Prophet ﷺ. So if you have issues, keep them to yourself. See? Keep them to yourself. Because you want to be able for people to look and see the difference. That, wow, Ahmed, as a person, to me, appears impeccable. I can trust them. And the key, wow, there's so many. And the key to that morality or ethical standard is what? That's the big question, right? Do you understand? We're talking about faith and its fruits. The key to that ethical standard, what is it really that really shakes us up? Why are we having a problem with the fact that I will say Ahmed goes to Jannah and Bob won't? What is it based on? Think about what the Prophet said, أَكْمَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِيمَانًا أَحْسَنُهُمْ خُلُقًا. The most perfect of all believers are those who are best in character. So he didn't mention Salah or Siyam, right? Or going for Hajj. Although these things are no doubt pillars, we have to do it, right? But all the things the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, what did he mention? Good character. And why did he mention that? You see how I'm relating this? Because in any normal person's mind, what they're going to judge is not so much whether you pray at night. It's not so much whether you pray 5 times a day. They're going to watch your behavior, and they're going to see who's ethical and who's not. And they're going to make a conclusion. That's why we're confused about this issue. Because normally when we see Ahmed, unfortunately, it's so bad. My own personal experiences, I won't, talk about. I even right at the moment that we speak, I'm dealing with it. But the moment I'm dealing with a monetary issue with particular Muslims, it should not happen. It's totally unethical. But it's no surprise, right? Unfortunately, it's so bad that I have to even give people advice like that. I've given people I know personally who tried to start businesses and in the beginning wanted to use people in the community, and the unfortunate advice I had to give them was what? Don't deal with Muslims. Unfortunately, I literally had to say that. Don't deal with Muslims. Keep the Gora. This is what I had to say. Keep with these. They'll pay you on time. They'll pay you what you deserve. They won't give you the runaround. They won't treat you bad. They won't do this when they'll, you know. And again, I'm not going to give them too much because you see what that does. It will confuse a person. Why is it that the Muslims, we believe in la ilaha illallah. We just said that Jannah that's the key. And these non-Muslims who say that Jesus is God or don't believe in God at all, why is it I can trust them and not him? So to kind of even it out, I say again, a lot of times it's just because they're afraid of being sued. I'm not saying that they're all perfect either. But at least they have that law that insists, they know, because they learned their lesson. We can't rely on each other. So we have to put laws intact that will protect each other from being, you understand? But at least that system is there. The laws are there. They're afraid of that law. They're not going to mess around with the money. You understand? So they'll pay you on time. They'll do what it needs to take because they don't want to deal with the headache of all of that. But the Muslim, for the most part, unfortunately, you will find our experiences. Now, what does that do? It creates confusion. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said the mi'yar, the standard of true iman is what then? Ahsanuhum khuluqan, those who have the best character. The more ethical they are, the more trustworthy, and on top of all ethics. And ethics usually obviously is used in terms of business and money and monetary matters. Correct? If they make a distinction, morality is usually how you deal with people, and ethics is how you deal with things like money, so forth and so on, business. Now, why am I mentioning all that? Is because, look, if the pinnacle of all of these ethics, at the end of all of it, and if you would even say, what is the very key and most important quality of even the Anbiya, meaning prophets themselves, in order to attest whether a person is truthful, I just gave you the biggest clue, whether someone's a prophet or not, what is the most key aspect of their ethics or morality? Truthfulness. Right or wrong? Sidq. Amana. So before the Prophet ﷺ was even given wahi, what was he known to be? Al-Alim. And in regards to what? Money. Business. His business ethic, his monetary ethics, everything that is related to other people's goods and property and money and all of that was so strong that everyone trusted him. This is what we know about him, right? People would give their goods, their business, literally their capital wealth to him. If he was alive today, we would trust him over a bank any day. You understand? Like let him have it. We know we can trust him. We know he'll never do anything funny. And we know if we want it back or we need it back or anything, we know Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam undoubtedly can be trusted. That's amazing, don't you think? Look what Allah is showing us. If the person can be trusted, if the person has an unwavering ethic in regards to other people's property and money and so forth and so on, then that's a sign of what? Truthfulness. And if they're truthful, then you can believe what they say about God. Is that correct? See, this is the big issue really what's going on in our heads is that how can I trust, how can they be right if all of them are cheats and swindles and liars and they can't be trusted, and if you give them $1, you're never going to see it again, right? And if you ask for $1, you're never going to get it, you know? What am I going to do with it, people? How are you going to trust them? This is a big test for us. And unfortunately, this is like what we're missing, because that is ultimately all these philosophical, theological, it's all wonderful. We can discuss it, right? And we can even arrive to a truth, meaning we can say, okay, yeah, that makes sense and I accept that. But after that's all said and done, if I go out in the real world and again I see this problem, what's going to happen to us as humans? I'm going to find it very difficult to digest that Ahmed is going to Jannah and Bob is going to hell. Why? Because I can't trust Ahmed. Bob, even if he may have his own ulterior motives, at least I can trust him. Right? Now, that may not be even true, but that's what we see. You see, that's what we see for the most part. So that creates the problem also. Whereas before, I think, when things were a little bit different, because there are cases in history which are recorded where literally whole nations of people who are Muslim to this day became Muslim based on the business ethics and practices of other Muslims. Indonesia and West Africa are two examples of that. And Indonesia is the largest Muslim population in the whole world. So we're talking about it's not insignificant, based on what? The ethical practices of Islam. That these people were so honest and so ethical in their dealings with us. It could be nothing, no other explanation, but these are people of truth. So they're not going to lie and swindle. Whereas, what do you think people thought about Europeans in those days? It's the conclusion you came. When they first met the British, the Dutch East India Company, all that, they weren't like, oh, these people, Bob is great. They were thinking, yeah, we got to watch out for these guys. We got to be careful. These guys are not to be trusted. When they first met these people, the Portuguese, the British, and the French and everything, they weren't like, oh wow, these are great people. Wow, how ethical are they? As they know, these are not impressive people by any standard. It was over time and a lot of concerted effort that they made to paint this image. But now they're the ones who can be trusted, and we're the ones who cannot. I think if we didn't have this test, we wouldn't even be asking these questions. It would be very clear to us. You see what I'm saying? Who is the people of truth and who are not?
So, the reason I brought up this time is, the question I have is less so about the subjectivity of good and bad, more so about the practicality of our relationship with Jews and Christians and their Aqidah.
Right.
So that is what's confusing me a little bit. Because in my mind, I always thought there's Muslims.
Yes.
If you put people in buckets, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and then the rest.
Okay. Yes. Good question. Now that has more to do with other subjects, and that is related to also, Imam Ghazali has a book called Mishkat al-Nur, Mishkat al-Anwar. It's actually translated into English. It's a pretty good read if you have access to it. The English translation is good. It's very good. It's called The Niche of Lights. It's the translation, Mishkat al-Anwar. The reason why I mentioned this book, because he categorizes the levels of light and darkness. So just like physically, there are actually, like even a light bulb has. There's levels of light and there's levels of darkness. Not everyone is in the same category. So in other words, certain types of light are stronger than others. Certain people carry more light than others. Anyone who has Iman has a certain amount of light, but that doesn't mean that light is strong. You can have a light and put a curtain over it, correct? Or anything over it that will, at that moment, the light is still on, but you can't see it because there's a veil over it. So there can be believers who have veils. That's possible. In the same way, darkness has levels too. You can have a level of darkness like the dawn, where it's dark out, but there's light. So based on that, what I'm trying to say is that just because a person is let's say, a kafir, right? You know what the literal meaning of kafir is? Is to cover. It's to cover something. Literally, it literally means to cover something. So there's levels also of kufr. There are, and that's why as a group, you can categorize people because they stand behind or believe in a certain, they have a common theme that they stand behind. But as people, we have to treat everyone what? Differently. Every individual is different. Some people's light is more than others in the same way. Sometimes their darkness is different and has different levels. So you speak to people according to what their condition is. That's the first thing. Second thing is, obviously, as a general rule, our relationship with people should always be based on good character, no matter who they are. Even your enemies. You understand what I'm saying? Even people who are literally billati ahsan. So Allah says that defend yourself with things that are better. So what does that mean? Even if people are your enemies and are opposed to you, of course you can defend yourself when the time comes, obviously, if there's a need for it. But normally, if they're not attacking you directly or assaulting you, how should you treat them? Good character. Right? And if you argue with them, even, what does Allah say? Jadilhum billati hiya ahsan. Same word. When you have to debate and argue in the best way possible. Even to the point, فَلَا تَسُبُّ. Don't insult their false gods. Don't insult, right? Don't be insulting towards these things. Talk about the issue if need be. Talk about the core issues we need be, and prove to them in a way that's intelligent but not insulting and not degrading. You see what I'm trying to say? Even if you have to argue, and even there's a hadith that I read years ago, and inshallah I'll find again the source of it, where the Prophet ﷺ said that when you sit with the Ahlul Kitab, don't discuss religion. When you sit with your colleagues and your neighbors and all that, unless they bring it up themselves, best policies to do what? Don't talk about it. Talk about the game. Talk about politics even, for that matter. Because, Americans, for some reason, they handle politics better than religion. Sometimes. All right? Talk about whatever it is that you need to talk about. But don't talk about religion with them. Imagine. Why? Think about it, right? Because you don't want that to become the point where you are completely and absolutely cut off from them. Ultimately, your dawah towards them, really at the end of the day, just like the most perfect believers, those who are best in character, your dawah towards them ultimately too will be that. It will be your character, it will be your behavior, it will be your ethics and your standards and morality. It won't be really so much what you say. Now, but having said that, because I love all this theology and debate and philosophy, there is a place for that too, but you have to know when and where. Okay, you have to know when and where. So you bring that up when the topic is brought up. You bring that up when it's necessary to bring it up. Otherwise, what do? Even, this is why the Prophet was told this. وَمَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. Imagine how the Prophet felt, knowing that certain people will go to hell. You think he wanted people to go to hell? You think he wanted his uncle to go to hell? إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. What did Allah tell him? You can't guide whom you love. Do you think the Prophet wanted any of that? He never wanted any of that. So he had to be told even that you just deliver the message, let me decide who is and who isn't going anywhere. Your job is only one thing, so the same message is for us. It's not a matter of wanting anything but good for everybody. But whom Allah is going to guide and who He's not going to, that's Allah's decision. You are only to be the representative. You are only to be the one who somehow in some capacity represents the message of truth in a way that people at least can see it. They can at least observe it. Right? Does it make sense? Or is there something else? And so each...
Our relationship with Jews and Christians is, from a practical standpoint, is different than it is with atheists and Hindus and Jews, right? Because when it comes to, maybe discuss this a little bit, issues of marriage and dietary issues, there is a difference. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's just like this ayah that's still a little bit unclear as what we know of Christians.
Yes.
By definition, how do you reconcile that this ayah with what they believe?
That's a good question, and okay, that's more specific. Here's the thing, that's why I said individuals also have to be treated differently, and also in certain groups. So
there are Christians that don't believe Hazrat Isa is the Son of God?
There are some. And so what the burden of the Muslim now, to add more burdens on top of us, is not just, it's not just the ethical standard, character. It's also to actually have knowledge. So to have knowledge of our own tradition is paramount importance. Because if we don't know our own Aqidah and theology, how will we ever explain it? Then on top of that, because we're now in this situation where we live in this society, we now have to know their theology as well. Because there are so many Christian denominations, and not all of them believe the same thing, and not all of them are going to receive you in the same way. So there's Unitarian Christians. They are the ones who question, for instance, the Trinity, and was Isa alayhi salam really God? That's why they're called Unitarians, meaning it's almost like the equivalent of Tawheed. We believe God is one, we believe Jesus, right? But then you have, after you get rid of all that, so now we have a commonality at least in that, right? I'm just giving you little hints, okay? You have a commonality there. Maybe I'll work with or talk to people of that denomination if I meet them in a different way than I would say a Protestant evangelical Christian who is completely Zionist, completely God, like they don't even Trinity, like in a Catholic sense it's different. They believe, no, Jesus is God. And they really don't like Muslims. That's why I call them Zionists, because that's the truth. They're the most ardent supporters of Israel. How are you going to talk to them? More than likely you're not going to talk to them. They're so adamant in their, ideology. They don't even want to get close to you, really. They believe you're like the Antichrist. And I mean that in every way. Like you're like, oh, that evil Muslim. I hope Israel gets rid of them really quick so we can bring on the second coming of, I'm not making this up, this is real. So your dawah to them is more of what? Just be good to them. Even if they're as rabid dog as they are, whatever, just be good to them. The other one you may be able to talk to because what? Right, and that's even the idea behind marrying Ahlul Kitab. The original jawaz and permission for that was the idea that when Muslims move throughout the world and they live in different circumstances and societies, you can marry a girl from that tradition because there should be a commonality in certain things. But then you have to know what kind of Christian or Jew they are. You see what I'm trying to say? You're not going to marry a Protestant and a Jehovah's Trust me. It's just not going to. It's just not going to happen. Perhaps a Unitarian, perhaps even maybe a Catholic. Although Catholics believe in Trinity, so then what that means, the burden is for you to know their tradition. What's the difference between the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Church and the Protestants and the Lutherans and how that started to the Protestant and blah, 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 all this stuff because their ideology, their ideas, you know now how to talk to them or how to deal with them. You see what I'm trying to say? And then even the Amish or the Quakers or anyone else for that matter. And even the atheists. Let's understand the atheist argument. Why are they atheists? Why are they agnostic? So I can talk to them. Sometimes to talk to an atheist and an agnostic is easier than talking to some Christians. As an example, the Protestant and evangelical, you trust you're not going to get across to them no matter how hard you try. In fact, if anything, they're there to convert you. If they're talking to you, they're there to convert you. That's their intention. But if you talk to an atheist and agnostic, a lot of times you'll find these are just curious people who really didn't understand Christianity, meaning it was not logical. And then you have other atheists who are just jerks, right? You understand? This religion is all nonsense, and they don't. But there's some that are just simply put, they're open to the idea of a creator. I was one of them. I wasn't a Christian before I became Muslim. I was agnostic. I didn't believe in Christianity. I didn't believe in the church. I didn't believe in anything Christianity said. But I knew I was open to the idea of a creator. You understand?
I guess my point is it fair to say a Christian who believes in Trinity is not only doing kufr, they're doing shirk?
Absolutely, of course. The
So
Quran
how
says that.
can you marry?
Okay.
Whether you believe in three
Yes,
gods or
right.
3,000 gods, how can you marry someone who's committing shirk?
You know what it is? This is the point that a lot of Muslims, this is another subject inshallah we'll bring up. It's a very important. Is sometimes,
Or eat their meat.
right, that's because they technically should be following Mosaic law. Like the Jewish kosher tradition. Technically, if they're true, that's another issue. If they're truly Nasara, remember the Nasara, and this is why we have to understand history, the Nasara in the time of the Prophet ﷺ had changed, but the original message and the original followers of Isa, the Hawariyun, and even the first Christians were Semitic. And they were in North Africa and the Middle East. They weren't eating pork or drinking, you understand? They were following the laws of Musa alayhi salam. And so part of the laws of Musa alayhi salam, similar to our own tradition of Dhabiha, they followed a tradition of slaughter and all of that. That's why, actually, look at why we have to know. The Amish still do that. Because the Amish try to follow the Old Testament and Mosaic law. So technically the Amish actually slaughter when they actually eat their food, they slaughter their animals in the same tradition or the same way, similar to kosher. So it's only the slaughter method that should have existed, did exist then, should exist now, doesn't, but that's another issue, right? But that's why they're meat. As far as why would, the question, they commit shirk, they commit kufr, why would they be able to marry them, right? Because they believe in the concept. At least they claim to believe, even if they've skewed the concept. We know that he changed it, but they claim to believe in oneness of God. And they also, the key here too, we already mentioned in the aaya, which is what? كُلٌّ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. They believe in messengers.
All of them.
All of them. But even if they believe in one of them, the key point is they have a concept that there is such thing as a man who is inspired by God to teach humanity the ways of God. That's a very key point. Not just that God exists, but that God has sent messengers and books Because then, your only job then is to convince them that what? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the messenger of Allah. You see, it's not new to them. You understand? Unlike other traditions, it's a new concept. What do you mean? Prophets. At least for a Jew and a Christian, the word they know. In fact, the Jews use the same word anbiya. They actually use that word in Hebrew. It's the same word. So they already have that concept. Their whole issue is what? You've got to get into what platform? Muhammad. Once they've accepted that Muhammad is the messenger, it means they automatically accept the Quran. If they automatically accept the Quran, what do they accept with it? No Trinity. You understand what God's oneness and Tawheed? It all comes with the package. That's the commonality that we have with them. You see what I'm trying to say? The commonality is that we both believe that there are messengers. We both believe, right? And this is why. Why do you think the ayah, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يُفَرِّقُوا بَيْنَ أَحَدٍ مِّنَ الرُّسُلِ, like another ayah, those who believe do not make distinctions between. Right. So even some Jews will tell you, yeah, Muhammad was a prophet, but he was a prophet for the Arabs. And that the Jews don't have to accept anyone other than the Jewish prophet, you understand? Other than someone from Bani Israel. He's a prophet for the children of Ismail, not for us. Okay? You see what I'm trying to say? So the commonality between them is this, that if we can show them that just like Isa alayhi salam, for instance, had miracles, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had miracles. Right? Just like Isa alayhi salam had certain characteristics, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had certain characteristics. If you accepted him as a prophet of God, then why are you denying him? And all the signs are there.
So in terms of the Messiah, I think it's not up to us to decide who's going to go to heaven or not. But the way I understand it, the way it's written, Allah is opening the door. There is a possibility that some Jew or Christian will be accepted into Jannah, but he will decide under what circumstances.
That's actually the second part of the explanation, was that the context of this ayah being revealed was actually Salman al-Farisi asked about his teachers before he met Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that what will be their situation. Okay? And this is what the response was. In other words, pre-nubuwwah, before, if someone doesn't know about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then this is the case. If they followed their tradition and they did good, Allah will accept it. But not after Muhammad. This is the key point here. After because this again is a message from God. This is a book from God. Now every human being is responsible for accepting that or rejecting it.
What if we never receive that message?
That's a different question. That's a separate issue.
I'm just, I would imagine if someone is a good person is trying to follow the teachings that they have been taught faithfully, then there's a possibility for that, I would think.
Yeah, if again, but that's if they had no knowledge of the actual coming of Muhammad. If they were completely, truly ignorant of that and they just faithfully followed whatever they were taught, then yeah, of course Allah will accept. But that's again, it's a thing that's very difficult in this day and age, especially to prove that someone has never heard of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
But it also goes back to, for example, the Pope, I'm sure is a great person.
Of course.
But look at his true belief system, and if he truly believes that this man is God in some form,
right,
everything he does thereafter, like you said,
it's irrelevant. Yeah, it's irrelevant. But that's the thing, and that's why now it's kind of hard to say that, to give people that leeway. It's very difficult. It could have been true even in the time of maybe even let's say 600, 700 years ago, even in the time of Imam Ghazali, actually proposed that idea that some Europeans who are living, at that time Europe was different, right? Who were living in the heart of England and France, or whatever it is at that time, and they just had no contact with Muslims or Islam. And the only thing they were taught is that Muslims are the Antichrist or whatever. Perhaps maybe they're exonerated, right? Because they're just wholly ignorant. But it's very hard to prove that now, is what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Maybe then, because Imam Ghazali did propose that idea. They just have no idea. and we don't have any contact with them. Right? So they don't even have the chance of meeting Muslims or talking to their scholars or interacting with Muslims and seeing what they really are. You see what I'm saying? So but to prove that now is difficult here, because now after all the information,
But that's not up to us. I mean, we're not going to make that decision.
no, you're right, but Allah has made that decision. That's the issue. If Allah has made the decision, we don't have to make that decision either. It's not up for us, you're right, to decide, but it is up for us to know what the truth is. At the end of the day, that's really what it's about, and that brings up other philosophical and which is why I bring it back to those issues, because, the idea even that there is a truth, this is also part of what the liberal modern construct does, is that it creates this perennial view, which is there's no such thing as a truth. You understand? Nobody can say there's a truth. We're all right in our own way, but even logically speaking, without religion, that's not true. You see what I'm saying? There's put it in just a mathematical way. There's not 6 or 7 answers for 2 plus 2. And you can't have 2 totally contradictory conclusions about one subject being both right at the same time. Take, for instance, God. Is he a man or is he not? These are 2 totally, they cannot be, right? Can you somehow explain away the differences between those 2 statements? The 2 totally contradictory statements. God is not a man, God is a man. Now, is there any way of saying that they're talking about the same subject, God's being, and what is God? Can they both be right at the same time? It's not logical. It's illogical without religion. It's either one is right or one is wrong. So at that point in time, it's not about even like all the things that we talk about being happy, being good. It's about who's right and who's wrong at this point in time. Right? It doesn't matter who's who. Right? Let's take these 2 statements, examine them logically, and say who's right, who's wrong, who has the right conclusion, who has the wrong conclusion. And if your conclusion is wrong, it's wrong. It's as simple as that. That doesn't mean I want to cut your head off, but your conclusion is wrong. So I don't care how good of a person you are. All day long, you can tell me 2 plus 2 equals 5. I'm not going to say, okay, yeah, you're right because you're such a good guy. Yay, 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's not going to happen. I know that that's not right, so I'm sorry. Your conclusion is wrong. Sometimes also it boils down to that. So, for instance, the kind of things that you think like, well, religion, that's another thing. Religion is just there to keep you happy. If it makes you a good person or makes you happy, religion is the opiate of the masses. All these things they brought up, right? Okay, if that's the case, I can be in this room. Let's just put it this way. Again, we have totally contradictory statements about reality and what God is and even life itself. We have an atheist, agnostic, a Sikh, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Christian, and a Jew all in the same room, and they're all happy. You see, if you ask them all, and they all say, yeah, I'm a happy guy, my life is going well, I'm doing well. So now is the criterion of who is right and wrong is based on happiness? Because can they all be happy? Yeah, absolutely. So you understand, like, I follow a religion because it makes me happy. You see, Muslims themselves have to get out of this idiot. I don't say what I say about God because it makes me happy. If anything, again, like, I believe these things. I accept them. It took me a while for me, especially as a new Muslim, because I'm the only Muslim in my family. The idea that people who don't accept Islam will go to hell, it's not an easy thing for me to swallow. Like, oh, yay, that's great. So if my dad dies right now, he's going to hell. That's not easy. It's not something you just look at and say, oh, yay. It's hard. It's a very hard thing to deal with. However, if that's what's going to happen, I can't play God either. Right? I have to accept it whether I like it or not. That was the biggest test to the Prophet ﷺ. That's why the Quran said what it said to him. إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You can't guide whom you love. Allah's guidance, it's up to Him. Even though He may have been a good man to you. Right? At the end of the day, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong, and people have a choice, their own moral choice, whether it's your father, your uncle, your whole society even. It doesn't matter. You have to follow what's right, and you have to follow what you know is right and what is true, even if the whole world is against you. That's the whole lesson of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, what God will do with them, again, we leave it to them, because it's not like, is what I'm trying to say, it's not like I want to see people going to hell. It's not like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to see people go to hell. It's not like Ibrahim alayhi salam wanted to see people go to hell. He even tried to argue with the Malaika. They were coming to destroy Lut as people. Lut's people. Didn't he try to argue with them? It wasn't like they were people who wanted these, which is a proof of their truthfulness too. Meaning they were told by God Himself, it's not up to you.
You know, I think
You see what I'm saying?
another way of thinking of it is the ultimate gift is maybe not going to heaven, it's Allah bestowing that initial guidance upon you. So for example, I think it's very difficult, for example, Mother Teresa.
Right.
Mother Teresa was a devout Christian, she wore a cross all the time, she did constant good, but ultimately, I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand why was she not given that guidance.
Right, given that guidance. Well, no, it's not. That's because you know what it is. Again, we're not privy to every aspect of a person's psychology, right? Sometimes people do good, right, as an example, because they want to be praised. Now, would you know that? How would you know that? Sometimes the only reason they do good is because they want to feel they're good, right? The harder thing is, what if I really don't want to do good? Like in my heart, I really don't like this person. Well, you know what? For the sake of Allah. So look how Allah puts it. This is when Surah Baqarah, what does Allah say about these people who are going to Jannah? When they feed people, what do they say? إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. That is a very intriguing ayah, because they say, what we fed you for Allah's pleasure. Neither did we want any recompense, and we didn't even want gratitude. Meaning we didn't even want you to acknowledge the good we did. We could care less. Could you imagine that for a second? We don't even want you to say thank you. Boy, you did such good to us. We really appreciate your... We don't even care about that. We don't even want acknowledgement. It's not even our purpose. So if you don't even want acknowledgement, it means you can literally give to anyone because you don't care. I don't care about their acknowledgement or if they can give me something in return. I'm doing this strictly for the pleasure of Allah. It's a totally different mentality, whereas another person says, I want to be a good person. You see what I'm saying? I want to be looked at and known as charitable. Even the Prophet ﷺ said that this is one of the people who will be tested on the day of Qiyamah. Those who gave their wealth for other people, charity and everything else, but they were asked, why did you do it? And they said, and your reasons, because you wanted to be known as that. And I gave you that. In other words, this is another deeper, God gave them what they wanted. They wanted in this world to be known as charitable. That's what He gave you. He didn't do it for me. So now when you come to me, what are you expecting? I gave you what you wanted. You see, God's fair. Isn't He not fair? I gave you what you wanted. Everyone said you were brave. You see, everyone said you were knowledgeable. Everyone said you were charitable. Everyone said you contributed to society. You did this. You got your plaque. You got your praise. You were written about in history books and people wrote poems about you. All that's done. Now what do you have? Do you see, this is the point that the Prophet ﷺ taught us. Right? And now what do you have? Now that you come to me, what do you got? You wanted what the people, you wanted them to make you happy. You wanted them to praise you and sing your praises even after death. They did all that. So now what? The dunya's gone. You can imagine, right? The dunya's gone. Those people died too. Everything's gone. The history books are gone. Now that you're in front of me, what do you want? You see, that's the key to it. This is why people who say La ilaha illallah should go to Jannah first, because their recognition should be what? The dunya is short. It's a test. I'm here to please Allah, even if it's only one thing I do for the sake of God, not for the sake of other people, not for the sake of living on and people praising me and saying I was a great person, but only for Allah, then maybe I can get something from Allah. You see what I'm saying? Otherwise, Allah is just. So therefore, will He give people, and that's another issue too. It's just, okay, we'll stop at this. If there's any other questions, we'll do that. But does God reward people for what they do, even if they don't believe in Him? And the answer is yes. But that's the whole point. If they don't believe in Him, they don't want Him and His pleasure. Right. They want what they want here. So God gives it to them. Okay, fine. Good health, praise, even praise includes what? Acknowledgement of their accomplishments. That mashallah, you're a very generous person, you're a very good person, right? They get everything, and that's what all. وَأَنَّ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. What does Allah say? Man only gets what they make effort for. This is the other secret. Ultimately, everything's with Allah. But what does Allah give you and me and everyone? What we want. You get what you want. So Allah is fair. You want this? You'll get it. I'll give it all to you here. You'll have good health, like I said, recognition, people will praise you, people will say you're a wonderful person, and people, but you did it because that's what you believe. You believe that this was the only existence you have. You believe that, this is what was worth making effort for. And so, there you are. So how can you complain about what God does at that point? You understand? God gave you what you wanted. Now, but you ignored what God wanted from you. That's the test. What did God want from us? That's the other key question. This is answered. The Quran answers itself. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They were only ordered to do one thing: worship Allah sincerely. What did God want from you out of all of this? You wanted this, you wanted that, you wanted to be a good person, charitable, blah, blah. It's wonderful. What did God want from you? Worship Him sincerely. Do whatever you do, even if it's small, right? Even if it's not much, but do whatever you do for God sincerely. That's what you were told to do. If you did your job, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you what you would never be able to imagine. But if you want to ignore what God wanted from you, and you want what you want, forget all that. I want to hear now. Right? I don't care about being sincere. I don't care what God wants from me. It's about what I want. That even then God's so generous that He'll give you that. Okay, that's fine. But you can't expect anything from me then. What I wanted from you, you didn't want to do, and you wanted to do what you wanted to do, I will give it to you. You will have it. But then after that, don't complain. See, does it make sense? And so how you deal with it basically, like we deal with everybody else, and also just to remind ourselves, the humility is that guidance, as you said, is actually a greater gift than Jannah itself. Jannah is the exchange of the reward of it. You see what I'm saying? So what's better? You have to have the. And also, if you want to put it that way, as some people have said, that Iman and servitude to Allah is better because it's for Allah. Jannah is for you. Still being selfish. I want to go to Jannah so I can do whatever I want. You sound like a little child, right? I just want to go to Jannah so I can do. No, what is it? No, I want to be grateful to Allah. Because even existence itself is a gift. And on top of that, Allah Ta'ala gives you common sense to know that a God is not God. Right? You see what I'm saying? Then you should be even more thankful that Alhamdulillah, Allah has guided me, right? And has allowed me to use my common sense to, to be grateful and to find guidance. And in shakartum, that Allah will give you more. Of what? Not necessarily the dunya. Even that we should be grateful to. Not to say, if Allah gives you any ni'mah, any ni'mah, right? What should we do? Whether worldly or otherwise, we should be thankful. Alhamdulillah, I have food. Alhamdulillah, I have electricity. Alhamdulillah, I have hot and cold water. Alhamdulillah, I have a job. Right? Alhamdulillah, I have that too. You should be grateful. But on top of that, you should also think about that. The greatest gift really, as you said, is hidayah. It's guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He doesn't give that to just anybody. He will only give that to people whom He knows there's something in them. As I said, if there's any good in you, Allah knows it, He'll guide you. وَأَعْلَمُوا بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. As He says to the Prophet ﷺ, again, the same thing, the Prophet too, we're all challenged with that. You're thinking this person is the perfect candidate. Right? And the other one, who Allah did guide, is this guy who's locked up in prison for life. Who just took Shahada. Again, why not Bob? Bob never killed anyone. Right? Allah knows best who wants to be guided and who doesn't. Allah knows best who deep down in their heart really wants the truth and who doesn't. I don't know how valid that is. I don't know if I could, but I heard that Winston Churchill had said that he ran into the truth a couple times and got up and brushed himself off. And he doesn't. I don't want to know. If it doesn't work for me, again, like if it doesn't give me my position and wealth and power, I don't care. Just let me go. Let me live my life. You see what I'm saying? I don't want to know the truth. So what does Allah say? Don't worry about who my guide. I know best who. Muhtadeen literally means a person who wants guidance. So then at the end of the day, you have to kind of acquiesce that I don't know. This person may seem to be worthy of it, but Allah knows they're not. And for whatever reason, And this person may be the last person, I would assume. Could you imagine how the Prophet ﷺ felt when the one who murdered his uncle came and became Muslim? Watching. In front of him, like, he's saying, like, okay, like, imagine that was you. It's not just so-and-so in prison for life for murder. This is the person who murdered your own relative unjustly and comes up to you and says, now I want to, like, what a test the Prophet ﷺ went through. You know, Abu Talib doesn't get guided. And this guy does. You know? Like Abu Talib, all the good he did to me, all the good that he was. Abu Talib was an excellent man in every respect of the word. Here's this guy in the bottom end of the totem pole in society and everything. He murdered my uncle. Allah guides him. So imagine how the Prophet, if you want to just put things in perspective, how he would have felt back then. Okay, I've got nothing to say. If Allah wants to guide this person, Allah doesn't want to guide this person. I can do it. It's not about me. Now that's the ultimate sacrifice. Am I right? So may Allah try to make it easy for us. It's not it's not always easy, but it should be at least. In other words, at least intellectually, maybe we can accept. And then inshallah Allah Ta'ala will not put us through the hard test that the Prophet ﷺ and others went through when it came to these things, having to see how Allah guides this person and not this person. You know what I'm saying? They're directly related to you also. That's something. Right? But also remember, I went off my point, the humility behind it all is this. Remember, like everything else, Hidayah is a blessing from Allah. Okay? We should always think to ourselves when we deal with other people that as people, even if they're not Muslim, they are better than us. My aqidah is superior. In other words, remember before I said 2 + 2 = 4, right? Now there may be a person, I understood the equation, I got it right. There may be a person who is infinitely better than me in every respect, and they got the question wrong. How should I feel? I know the answer to the question, but I know this person is infinitely better than me in every respect, as a person. You understand the difference? If you understand what I'm saying, the attitude we should have. My aqidah is correct. God is God. Muhammad is his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? God is not a man. Okay, I know that's right. But my next door neighbor, I'm just using Bob as this, infinitely better than me in terms of his ethical, moral responsibilities. So at the end of the day, I believe even as a person, he's better than me. But I know what's right, and he doesn't. You see what I'm saying? That's the humility of it. That, so maybe, in other words, I don't know even my own end. It could be that Allah Ta'ala, because of my own irresponsibilities and problems and immorality, Allah forbid that He takes that truth away from me. And then if He gives it to Bob, then what will happen? Bob will also be an infinitely better Muslim than I could have ever been. You see how even through all of it, we still have to have the humility? You see what I'm trying to say? That at the end of the day, it's not my right. God gave it to me. If He wants, He could take it away from me and give it to that person. And then they will actually end up being a much better Muslim. So ultimately, we don't even have the right, even through all of this, to do what? To look down on people and to say that, so on. Because we don't know our own end. We don't know what's going to happen to them. And even if I know the truth, I still have to be humble and say that they're still better than me anyhow, but for this reason, that reason. That's why it's good to interact with other people. You know why it's good to interact with other people? Why even in the old days, scholars themselves were never considered serious unless they traveled. Because when you travel, you get to see the problems with yourself and also even with the traditions and the culture that you were growing up. You see the good in other people and you learn from it. Right? If you're only stuck in one place all the time, then you just immediately assume that everything you do is right. That's part of the problem with a lot of Americans today too. Honestly, they need to travel to do what? To see where, not everything about being American is wonderful. There's certain things about other traditions, cultures, and people that I need to learn from in the same way that people should. Traveling and looking at other people, no matter how different they are from you, teaches us always. So true or not? Were the Muslims able to adopt good things from other cultures historically? We kept our aqidah, we didn't change what we believe, but were we able to adopt good things from other cultures historically? Yes. We were able to adopt and incorporate whatever was good from different people and cultures. So we always have to be humble. It's just that the truth is what? Truth is the truth. Does that make sense?